CarandTruckTalk.com presents the 2004 Jeep Liberty brake job. We're going to teach you how to do brakes on your Jeep or your other vehicle. Here's our subject vehicle, the 2004 Jeep Liberty, and of course no roaming charges on this Jeep. We're going to raise her up on the rack now. You may not have a rack at home. If you use a jack, please use jack stands underneath for your own safety. We're going to take the wheels off now on the 2004 Liberty. We have air tools. If you do not have air tools, you'll be using some tools that are common to the trade. A 3/8 ratcheting wrench. You're going to need a C-clamp, and you're also going to need a wide assortment of sockets. You want to remember to loosen your master cylinder cap before doing the brake job. This way, when you compress your caliper, you're not going to have a problem. Master cylinder cap undone, we can put our C-clamp around the brake pads and compress them so that we can take the caliper off. We're using a 12mm socket on the caliper here, and of course we have our old trusty 3/8 ratchet drive. Here's a mechanic's tip. Use an old piece of chain. You're going to link it onto your caliper. Just pull it right off of the rotor there and hang it to the side. This way you're not going to get tangled in your brake job that way. And that's a good mechanic's tip there. Cheap piece of chain. You want to keep the brake hose away from the job. You don't want to damage that. Now we're going to take off our caliper bracket. We're going to use a 13/16 socket to do this. And off comes the bracket, and then you can slide your rotor off and continue your brake job. With your rotor off, you can now inspect the hub bearing itself. Make sure there's no rust buildup on this hub bearing. If there is, you're going to have to get a wire brush and brush it off. Next, add some anti-seize coating to the face of the hub bearing. This will prevent the rotor from sticking to the hub in the future if you need to replace this rotor again. It'll save you a lot of headache and heartache trying to get that rotor apart. If you haven't already, now's the time to take your brake pads and rotors out of the box. These are centric rotors, one of the better branded rotors out there. They have a coating on them to help them prevent from rusting, and they also ship with a coating of lubricant on them that you want to take off. You can use carburetor cleaner or brake clean on this, and you want to get that shipping lubricant, so to speak, off of the rotor. All rotors ship with a substance on them to keep them from rusting and prevent them from rusting in the box. Next, we're going to move on to our caliper hardware. We're going to clean the bracket off with a wire brush. We want to make sure the surfaces have a good, clear, clean appearance. No rust on them, and inspect your hardware also. You may need to replace that hardware. If not, you can just coat up your areas where your bolts are going to slide through with some caliper grease, or even some regular grease will do the job for you. Inspect your caliper bolts. If they don't need replacing, just lube them up, and you're ready to put that bracket back on, along with your new brake pads and your rotor. Our caliper bracket is now ready to be reinstalled onto the bracket assembly. We put the caliper bracket on and hand tighten the bolts. Never attempt to tighten up these caliper bracket bolts before you hand tighten them into the assembly. Next, we're going to use our breaker bar and tighten each bolt with an equal amount of turns. We don't want to over tighten this. You can do some real damage if you over tighten a bolt onto the caliper bracket assembly. once the caliper bracket is securely in place, we're going to snug it up. And then we'll be ready for our brake pads. You'll notice that on this Jeep Liberty in the front, all 4 pads are the same, so you don't have to worry about the way that you put them back into the caliper. On the rear of the Jeep Liberty, however, the pads inboard and outboard are different, so you will have to line them up, and we'll cover that in another edition of Jeep Liberty brake pads. Continuing on with our brake job now, we're going to reinstall our brake pads into the caliper bracket. They're going to clip right in there and be securely fastened to your caliper bracket. Next, we're going to remove the main caliper off of our chain and reassemble it back on top of the bracket. The caliper itself will slide right into the assembly, and then you're ready to reassemble the caliper bolts into the bracket to hold it all down. And of course, you want to hand tighten these caliper bolts again as we did with the caliper bracket. Hand tighten the bolts into the bracket assembly, and then we want to apply an equal amount of turns on each bracket bolt as we did with the bracket bolt assembly. Again, we don't want to over tighten the caliper bolts, but we want to tighten them enough so that they are securely fastened to the caliper assembly. And there you have it. You've got the front pads of a 2004 Jeep Liberty changed, along with a brand new rotor. You might want to take the time to look at the ball joints or inspect the tie rod ends here on this Jeep Liberty now that you have it apart. If everything looks good, you're good to go. You've just done your first brake job on your Jeep. You can even inspect the CV axles at this point, assuming you have the Jeep up, and then your tire goes back on, and you can do the same for the other side, and you're done. That's all there is to it. Thank you for listening to and watching the Car and Truck Talk brake tutorial. Don't forget to put your master cylinder cap back on, and happy motoring!
Thank you.